Let's turn now to the 8th chapter of the book of Daniel, and beginning with verse 6 and 7, where we have two beasts fighting with each other, a ram and an he-goat. The ram had two horns. The he-goat had one notable horn between his eyes. Verse 7, he runs into the ram in the fury of his power, stamps the ram in the ground, and none can deliver the ram out of the hands of the he-goat. Therefore the he-goat waxes strong, and verse 8, it said, for that notable horn that fell off came up four notable horns toward the four winds of heaven. That represents the same as what you find in history. Get any ancient history, and you find that Alexander conquered all the eastern parts of the world called Iraq and Iran, way over to the river of India, and coming from Greece, taking in all of Turkey, all of Iraq and Iran, Transjordan, all that part of the world, and Egypt. When Alexander died, four of his generals seized upon his empire. Cassander took Greece and Macedon. Lysimachus took Asia Minor or modern Turkey. Ptolemy founded the kingdom of Egypt, and Seleucid founded the kingdom of the Syrians. So four divisions were made out of Alexander's empire after his death. That means when Alexander died, his kingdom was divided. And to prove that without any further argument, let's go now to the 20th verse. Here we have the interpretation of this, just like you have the other interpretations. And that's how I can get by. It's just so simple, so easy. You can see it with your own eyes. In fact, you can tell me any question about it I ask you. You can get just as quick as I can. What did he say the ram in verse 20 represented? Media, Persia. What did he say the he-goat represented? The next 21. Verse 21. Kingdom of Grecia. What did he say the notable horn represented? The first king. Now that's what it says. And I would take a chance on believing that that's what it really means. I really would. We have so many peculiar interpretations these days, you have to laugh, try to sleep it over something. Here we have a very simple explanation now that Alexander's empire was to be divided into four parts. And notice verse 9. Verse 9. Out of one of them, out of one of them, out of one of them, out of either Greece, Turkey, Syria, or Egypt would come the little horn. Russia is still not involved. Italy is not involved here. None of the western divisions of the old Roman Empire is mentioned here. None of them. I guess we'll just have to leave off some of these modern countries and limit the doctrine of the Bible to what it's talking about, not what it's not talking about. So here we have four kingdoms and the Antichrist, the little horn, coming out of either Greece, Turkey, Syria, or Egypt. All right, that does away with 6 of the 10 of the Roman Empire. These 4 make 4 of the 10, but the other 6 now, they could not possibly be the countries from which Antichrist must come. That excludes any Pope of Rome. That excludes anybody from Italy, anybody from any part of the Roman Empire except these 4 of the 10 divisions. Greece, Turkey, Syria, Egypt. I'm trying to go a little slow so we can get it clear as we go along. The Antichrist is never coming from Russia or Germany or from Italy or any of these countries. Many countries, Bible students, some of them say he will come from. Just forget about it. It's not going to happen. And I don't advise you to stay out and live down here after the rapture to find out whether it's going to happen or not. You'll know in due time. We have here the 4 divisions now, and that's all we need out of this chapter 8. Let's go now to chapter 11. In verse 2, 3 kings shall stand up yet in Persia, and a 4th shall be richer than they all, and he through his strength and riches shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. Now notice in verse 5, what king do you have mentioned? King of the south. In verse 6, what king do you have mentioned? King of the north. The idea is here that the king of the north, Syria, and the king of the south, Egypt, north and south of Palestine, those two parts of Alexander's empire, are fighting with each other here. And in the Dake Bible, we have 25, we call this the chapter or the section of 25 wars. Literally, 25 wars were fought between Syria and Egypt for 150 years, ending with the reign of Antiochus Epiphanes, who reigned 165 BC. Then the prophet skips over to verse 40 and says this, at the time of the end. At the time of the end shall the king of the south, Egypt, come against him, the king of the north, Syria. And the king of the north, Syria, will come against him, against the king of the south, Egypt, like a whirlwind. And he, the king of the north, shall enter into the glorious land, Palestine. Many countries shall be overthrown by him, but these shall escape out of his hand. Now, yesterday, we gave you plenty of countries that are going to escape the Antichrist. The Antichrist is not going to be a worldwide ruler. And so we might as well just forget that also while we're forgetting some other things. He will not rule America. You good folk over here in Anaheim, you can go and visit Queen Mary every Monday if you want to. And no one will ever bother you in the days of the Antichrist. Because the Antichrist only rules the 10 kingdoms eventually inside the Roman Empire. And he is conquered by Jesus Christ at Jerusalem before he even takes ship and comes over to the United States. Isn't that good news? Well, I'd vote for that anytime, wouldn't you? Keep him out of here. He's going to be out anyway, so I guess you won't have any trouble. We have then the Antichrist coming from Syria. Why? Because we read on here in this last war between Syria and Egypt, and it says, the land of Egypt shall not escape, but the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. Now, during or just before the last World War, I think around 1935, Mussolini conquered Ethiopia. Oh, the Bible scholars all jumped on Mussolini's bandwagon right now. Well, that's it. They read in the 11th chapter of Daniel that the Ethiopians were going to follow him, and here he had Ethiopia. So they began to hail him as the Antichrist. It all turned out to be foolishness, just like a lot of these other prophetical, sensational things. The Bible is very sensational if you'll just get the right slant on it. It beats all this wrong slant sensationalism. I don't care who takes Ethiopia or what, other country. If the Bible mentions that that this country is going to follow the Antichrist, then that's going to happen too. That doesn't mean that anybody who ever conquers Ethiopia is going to be the Antichrist. But the Antichrist will, in his day also, conquer Ethiopia. The Ethiopians shall be at his steps. Then we read tidings in verse 44. Listen to this very carefully now. I wish you'd turn to your Bibles on this. Here is a very important point which you need. And we'll let you take it home with you tonight. 11:44 of Daniel. Listen to it now. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him, this king of the north. Therefore he, the king of the north, shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly make away many. Now, if Russia is the king of the north, as some teach, then will you pray tell me, look at that map you got there, or get any map you can possibly find tomorrow and search for countries north of Russia that could possibly come down against Russia if Russia is the king of the north. I don't really see any countries up above Russia, do you? Russia is the farthest north, and if Russia is the king of the north, as some tell you, then what countries are north and east of Russia that could fight with Russia to fulfill this scripture? It's impossible to believe that. What are we to believe then? We are to believe that the king of the north refers to some man inside the Roman Empire territory and king of some country north of Palestine. And what country is north? Syria. What country is south? Egypt. The wars all through this 11th chapter are between the king of the south, Egypt, and the king of the north, Syria. So it makes sense when you believe that the Antichrist then will be a Syrian and will come from Syria. And then we read tidings out of the north and east of Syria, north and east of these 10 countries inside the Roman Empire. That's what we're studying about. And Russia could be involved in that, all right. So that's the only country north of Syria there. Germany and those countries. So the idea is very plain that when Antichrist breaks his covenant with Israel, enters into the glorious land, takes over Jerusalem, and the temple as his capital building, that he conquers Egypt and becomes the king of the north. Then war is declared against him by Russia and Germany and those countries north. Oh, you say Russia's not mentioned one. I know that. But I don't know any other country here. If you can find some other country between Syria and Russia, well, we'll go along with you. But there is none. There is none. All right, we have then countries north and east of the 10 kingdoms making war on this new ruler of the 10 kingdoms. And Antichrist conquers these northern and eastern countries during the last 3.5 years of this 7-year period known as Daniel's 70th week. Now, if Antichrist would come from Russia, all this would be nonsense. None of this would be fulfilled. But now, since he's coming from inside the Roman Empire, and he's fighting countries north and east of that empire, then that makes real sense. We read in verse 45 of this 11th chapter, he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain, and he shall come to an end, and none shall help him. All right, now we have Mr. Antichrist inside the Roman Empire and conquering countries north and east. Now that's how God protects Israel when Antichrist breaks his 7 years covenant with her and determines to destroy Israel, as in Matthew 24, verse 15. When you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Anaheim flee into the mountains where there is no smoke. I beg your pardon. Let them which are in Judea, flee into the mountains. Judea, flee into the mountains. Let them which are on the housetop not come down thinking anything of the house. Woe to them, or child them that give suck in those days. Pray that your flight from the Antichrist in the middle of that 7 years be not in winter, neither on the Sabbath day, for then shall be great tribulation, such as never was since there was a nation this same time, no, nor ever shall be. So here we have Israel being defeated by Antichrist. And you can mark it down in your own little book that the Antichrist is the only one the Bible predicts in the future that will conquer Israel. He makes a 7 years covenant of peace with Israel. Then in the middle of the 7 years, he breaks that contract and suddenly enters into Palestine, takes over that country, takes over the Jewish temple, setting himself in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Then now what happens? In verse 22 of this 24th chapter of Matthew, except those days be shortened, there shall no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. What happens? Well, God raises these new enemies against the Antichrist in the north and east to keep him from going after the fleeing Israelites into the land of Jordan. Well, that country escapes the Antichrist. And in order to protect the Jews, these new wars are brought up brought about by God, and keeps the Antichrist occupied the last 3.5 years of this age, then at that end time, we read that he will bring all those newly conquered countries from the north and east together with his 10 kingdoms, together with other nations who will cooperate with him through the ministry of the 3 unclean spirits. They all come down now from the north, fulfilling Ezekiel 38 and 39 at the Battle of Armageddon, and not in some war between Russia and Israel before that day. You just got too many things to face when you've got a war of Russia coming down in there, and the Antichrist already conquered the whole country, every part of the old Roman Empire. You can't have 2 major powers in here. And by the way, now let me make it clear to you, lest somebody finally figures out how we got Russia in the deal to begin with. In the Septuagint, the Greek version of the Old Testament, Bible scholars say that the word Rosh is found there 1 time, be that as it may. Be all right. We'll leave it there. We won't argue the point at all. But we will point this out to you, that Russia is not fulfilling all these prophecies about a formation of 10 kingdoms, and Russia is not the place Antichrist comes from, for he comes with inside the Roman Empire, you see. Let Russia be in that one passage in the 38th chapter of Ezekiel, verse 2. But the Antichrist becomes the Gog, or the leader of Russia and Germany and those countries, or Rosh, as they call it, by conquest, not by originating in Russia at all. He conquers these countries north and east. That's the only part that Russia has in the whole setup, except one more point I might point out to you. Back to the 7th chapter, where we read that the 10 kingdoms will be formed inside this Roman Empire territory. Now notice very carefully, there are 3 or 4 states inside the Roman Empire that are now controlled by Russia. Romania, Bulgaria, Austria, certain big countries like that inside the Roman Empire. Russia must be defeated or must have a change of heart, one of the two, in order to give up her hold on all these countries she now controls inside the Roman Empire. Because God predicts in Daniel 7 that 10 kingdoms must be formed, and Russia must get out of the old Roman Empire territory in order for these 10 kingdoms to form. And if that be the case, then you see Russia's not going to be the big shot in world affairs. Russia will be defeated to form the 10 kingdoms, if that be true. And then Russia will be defeated by the 10 kingdoms when Antichrist conquers them and gets power over them, when he conquers the countries north and east. And I know another great chieftain, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, who is going to defeat Russia and Antichrist and all other nations who are gathered around against Israel at the Battle of Armageddon. So if you're going to come right down to it, Russia's going to have a hard time. I don't know where she's going to get all of her power all the time to fulfill all these great things Russia's supposed to do instead of the Antichrist doing them.